Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to talk about Golden Age heroes and why I think the Golden Age and the Golden Age heroes are the future of comic books. And what got me thinking about this was Captain America. Now, I would like to do a whole series on this. If I get a chance to do more videos on this, I will. But today I'm just going to focus on Captain America and why and how that Golden Age hero brought comics to where they are right now, and why people can use the same formula in order to make our comic industry a healthy industry again. Now, many people forget the fact that Captain America was not originally a Marvel hero. Captain America was a Golden Age hero, and Captain America was written for many different comic companies, and he was written in the 1940s, and his books sold 1 million copies per issue originally. That is amazing for numbers of comic books sold, and this is the 1940s. Captain America was huge. It outsold Time magazine at one point. So this was how popular Captain America was. But as we know, there was a falling away. If you know anything about comic book history, there was a massive falling away of people wanting superheroes in their comics after the 1940s. And Captain America died out, and so did almost all of the Golden Age comic book heroes. But when Marvel Comics came along, they rejuvenated Captain America. They took him, this old Golden Age hero, and made him one of the pillars of their company, one of the mainstays of their company. He was the hero that everyone would identify with. If you had talked to normies back in the 1980s and asked them if they could pick out a superhero that wasn't your normal DC one like Superman or Batman, the only ones that they could come up with, I'm sure, from Marvel would have been Spider-Man and Captain America. Possibly the Hulk, just because he was all over the place on television. But Captain America was one of the pillars of Marvel Comics and bringing Marvel Comics into what it actually was. And he was a Golden Age hero. And what they did was they revived this Golden Age hero in order to help revive the superhero comic book industry. And there's no real trick to doing this. It is simply appealing to their audience. And I think that this way of appealing to your audience that worked for Marvel Comics when they originally started up and were building their industry, it will work again today. And we can see this in our comics today, that people are looking for these older kinds of heroes. And the great thing about most of these Golden Age heroes today is that they're in the public domain, which means anybody can use them. And multiple comic companies are using these Golden Age heroes. And so this is really something that goes back to just the publishing industry itself, not just the comic book industry. And it, I would say, ties into the comic book industry in a very interesting way. I've gone over this in a couple of my videos, that as at the very least a North American comic book reader, you expect something in your comic book which isn't actually physically part of the comic book. You expect there to be a history to that comic book. You expect there to be something that you can latch onto and grab onto, and you are able to connect with a history, sort of a pop culture memory, a cultural memory of these characters that you can draw on. And there's no mystery to that, because I would say that, and I have said in a number of my videos, that entertainment is leisure, and for it to be leisure, you got to make it not work. It can't be work. And one of the ways that you can make it leisure, make sure that it's not work for the person who is actually trying to use this entertainment, is to give them a really easy jumping on point so that they don't have to do work in order to get into what you're presenting them. And if there is a history already there for them to jump onto, especially a history that they can tap into, either in their own minds or in pop culture itself, then great. Easy way for them to jump onto it right there. And so that history that I believe that all North American comic books need is something that is missing to some extent in comics today, and it's missing in a very interesting way. It's because the big two, who are the mainstay of comic books, have messed up their continuity and their history so much that people don't want it anymore, that it becomes a hindrance to their reading the book, because it actually becomes work, because they've had so much history. And it's in two very different ways, because Marvel has just, it has so much history, true, and that's great, but they have messed up their continuity so many times, especially with the SJW Marvel that they have right now. They have screwed up so many of their characters and so much of their history that it's become so convoluted that even as a normal comic book reader, you would find it difficult to follow things at this point in history, of Marvel history. And so that history has actually become work. And if it becomes work, it's not leisure. If it's not leisure, it's not entertaining. If it's not entertaining, I don't want it, is what most consumers would say. And DC is at the very opposite of that spectrum. DC has always retreated to their core characters in their core state. Every time things have gotten hard, they've always retreated to that one point, and retreated to it so much right now that it doesn't matter what comic you're reading, it doesn't matter what story they're presenting, it's not going to make any impact on their continuity or their history at all, because it is unchangeable. It will never change. It's, even if it does change, it's always going to go back to that same point, starting point. So what's the point of reading it if it's not actually going to develop anything? And so this is the way that the big two have messed up this fundamental thing which readers are looking for, this fundamental history which readers expect, I would say, at the very least in North America, for their comics. But there is a way to do that. There is a way to use a history and to bring it out for your comic book readers, and I think it is something that is just ripe for the picking right now and will be the future of comic books. Because in any genre of writing, and this is not just for comic books, but for any genre, if you're a new artist, if you're a new writer, and people don't know your name, and you're trying to sell your story, it has to 100% go on its merit, because you can't have any name recognition. You don't have any name recognition. So your story has to stand alone. And if you're dealing with a publisher, or even with an editor that you're trying to get to the publisher point, they're always telling you that you have to tie your story into something that's already known, to give it to some extent a history. You're told that never say you've come up with something completely new. First of all, because they say, A, that's a lie, and B, because if it is completely new, no one wants to actually read it. Why? Because it's too much work. It's too much work to get into something completely new. You need to give your reader an easy jumping on point. So you're always told that if you write a story, you have to tell whoever it is that you're trying to sell the story to, it's the new version of, I don't know, Harry Potter. It's the new version of Hunger Games. It's the new version of Captain America, if you're doing, a comic book wise. You always have to tie in some kind of history so that you can give your people and your readers and the people you're trying to sell it to a jumping on point, so that they can connect it in their mind with something easily. And it is this jumping on point and this use of history that Golden Age heroes, public domain heroes, are giving to comics today and can give to comics. And I think that, again, this is the future of comic books. And why? Well, because you have to simply look at the world today. And if you look at the world today, especially over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, there has been a sea change in the world. And it has turned away from the left and towards the right. And if you just have to look at country after country, institution after institution, groups of people after groups of people, there is a massive shift going on right now all over the world. And it's changing from far left to right. And the way that it is mostly being rejected, the far left ideas are being rejected, is the far left ideas are these ideas of globalism. People don't want globalism anymore. And partly they don't want globalism because it's so complicated, it makes things so complicated, and it also just gets rid of your history. It gets rid of your uniqueness as a country, as a person who is a part of a specific country X, right? So people are moving back to traditionalism. And the thing is that Golden Age heroes fit really well into this traditionalism because people are turning back to the right, I would say, because they want more simplicity and they want to just go back to their traditional roots. And the last time that they have seen these traditional roots really flourish were the 40s and the 50s. Now, right or wrong, you want to look at history and argue that point, you can do so. But that's the way that people see it right now. That last time you saw the roots of your country, your society in its flourishing form as not an international organization, but just a traditional thing that was healthy, was the 40s and the 50s. And this is where these Golden Age heroes come from. And I think that this is something that is going to explode in the near future because, again, as a writer, if you have, there are so many things that you can use with Golden Age heroes because when you write something, usually what a person does is they write it and then they say, okay, how do I edit this in order to make it as appealing as possible to my audience? But if you do the reverse, if you say to yourself, I'm going to write a story X and I want to make sure from the very beginning that I appeal to my audience, then how do I do that? Well, you do that by tapping into what people are looking for today, and you do it by tapping into that history, and you do it by tapping into that idea of leisure and entertainment. And the thing is that the Golden Age heroes present the best opportunity to do that right now. Because, first of all, if you have someone who actually wants to write comic books, all they have to do is research these characters, and they will already have a character sitting there ready for them to use. They don't have to come up with a new character, a new look. They don't have to come up with a backstory. They don't have to come up with a power set. It's already sitting there ready for you. And so that cuts out a lot of your work. And you just have to do the research in order to find these things. And if you're actually someone who really, really wants to write comic books, that's not actually research. That's fun. And that's the problem with a lot of these SJWs. They don't want to even do that basic research because they don't think it's fun, and they therefore should not be writing comics. But for a reader, it makes things really easy. And it also provides for your reader something that's already out there for them to grab onto. Now, they're probably not going to know this history to begin with because these heroes are really old, but if they actually like what you're presenting, then they can go on the internet and look it up for themselves, and it's sitting right there, and you don't have to do a thing in order to draw them further and further into liking your heroes. And it is presented right there for them. And the really great thing, the reason why I think that this is going to explode in comics, because a lot of these not just comic, but a lot of these older Golden Age heroes, they were not just in comic books. They were in magazines, they were in pulp fiction as well. And there's a lot of different genres of writing that they were actually in, but I think comics is the way to pull them forward the best, because the visual and the art is something that right now I can see, again, starting to explode all over media, all over the internet, all over magazines. You see these things where you have people taking modern things and making a cover for them as if they were a pulp fiction novel from the 1940s. They're taking, say, Empire Strikes Back and making a piece of art that looks like it's a cover for a pulp fiction Empire Strikes Back that was written in the 40s. Or they do it for Blade Runner, or they do it for a number of things. They've even done it for, I've seen ones for Mario, for, Super Mario Brothers. And he looks like a guy who's been pushed too far and is trying to save this lady in a suspense novel. And it looks beautiful. It looks absolutely gorgeous. And it just grabs people. You can see from the likes when people post these things on the internet that it is grabbing people because it is hearkening back to that simplicity. It is hearkening back to that traditionalism that everyone is starting to hunger for right now. And it is taking those new stories and it is tying it to that history through the art. Because 40s and 50s art doesn't work anymore, not for comic books. But if you use your art correctly, if you use that art in order to tie the stories to the history and you draw your audience in through that, this is the way that comic books are going to start selling like hotcakes again. And I would say that Red Rooster is the first comic in the modern period, like today, right now, that has jumped on this bandwagon. Now, Red Rooster is not actually using a Golden Age hero. It's producing a story that looks like it was Golden Age. And most of the other independent comics, not just independent comics, but Indiegogo and crowdfunded campaigns, they're harkening back to the 80s and the 90s, and it's working really well. But like I said, I think that people starting to harken back to the Golden Age is the way of the future for comics. It is what is going to explode. Just looking at what people are looking for in their lives, and not just politically, not just individually, but it's going to start to move in their entertainment, because they're not getting it in their entertainment right now. There has been this sea change in politics and in the mindset of people throughout the world, but media has not kept up with that. Media is still pushing this so-called progressive leftist international idea in all of their entertainment, in all of the media that they're producing. And if someone were to jump on this is the bandwagon, if you want to jump on it right now, that is going to take off soon. And that I think that comic books will lead the way in bringing this back, bringing these Golden Age and traditional ideas back to people's minds in a very simplistic way that is providing history and is going to be the simplicity and the traditionalism that ties together modern stories and modern art with old stories and these ideas that everyone is hungering for right now in the world. All right. I have a lot more to say on this. Hopefully I'll get some more videos out about these Golden Age heroes and where I see them going in the near future. But I'll leave it there today. If I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a message so that you can give me something new to think about. Share this video. I always post everything on my Twitter. If you want to share the video, all you have to do is go to my Twitter page, which is in the link in the description, and hit retweet. That would be great as well, so we can get these ideas out there for as many people as possible so that we can help our comic industry become a healthy place again. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.